Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very respected and accomplished author from California, USA, Catherine Ann Jones. Catherine, welcome to the show.
I think, yes.
Uh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine is an award-winning author and a writing consultant. After playing major roles in over 55 plays on and off Broadway, she became disappointed by the lack of good roles for women and wrote a play, On the Edge, about Virginia Woolf and her struggle with madness in a world gone mad, with Hitler and World War II. She's also an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled The Way of Story, The Craft and Soul of Writing, Heal Yourself with Writing, and What Story Are You Living, amongst many others. So, Catherine, let me start by asking you that, you've done such diverse roles in your life, if I can use the term roles. What inspired you to transition from acting to playwriting, especially with a focus on strong female characters?
Well, you said it already that the roles I was playing, this was in the 70s and 80s, the 70s mainly. They weren't three-dimensional women's roles, and I just got a little bored with it. And the last one I did, public television chose us to, they have a program called Great Performances. I don't know if you get that in India, but they chose The Patriots, which had won a Pulitzer, about Thomas Jefferson and his daughter, Patsy. And I played that, and then it went on national television, and I don't know, something had just stopped in me. I knew I didn't want to do this anymore, but I wasn't sure what would be next. And I've had, since I was rather young, I kind of listened to my intuitive voice within. And even if I don't know why, I follow it. And so I stopped acting. And for 3 months, I just wasn't sure what I'd do next. And then one day I just sat down and I got very involved with, I had played Virginia Woolf in an off-Broadway comedy. And I realized there was at that time, no play about her serious side. And I read, of course, when you prepare a role, you read everything you can about the person. Now, this was before her letters and diaries were published. So I just wrote a play about the last 4 years of her life. And it won the National Endowment for the Arts Award, which gave me enough to live on for 1 year, which was great. So I took that as a confirmation that this was the road. And there's no better background for writing plays or movie scripts than acting. Many dramatic writers come from acting, including Shakespeare and Moliere, incidentally. But and so I've had 11 plays produced.
Wow.
And then I was invited to Hollywood to write movies. And so, the best things in my life have come unexpected and unasked.
Fantastic. And when I was reading about you, I was fascinating that you have a background in psychology and archetypal mythology. How has this influenced your approach to writing and storytelling?
Well, even as an undergraduate, though I studied theater, I was always interested in Carl Jung, the psychologist who broke off from Freud and went a more mystical route. And I was working in Hollywood and teaching graduate screenwriting at USC in Los Angeles, and writing for a series and writing a movie for Dolly Parton for Disney. I just kind of burnt out. And I knew I needed a break. And I had a dream. I listened to my dreams. And in the dream, a woman was 6 months pregnant. And I interpreted that in 3 months' time, a new life would begin for me, something new. And then 2 days after shortly after the dream, I always write the dreams down. Someone invited me for lunch, and she lived in Ojai, where I live. And she said she was getting her graduate degree at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara. Now that's 40 minutes from where I live. And it's a Jungian institute. And when I heard the word, intuitively, I knew that was right. So the next morning I drove to the campus, and they said that the next day was the final day to register for the next semester. And I said, when does the next term start? She said, in 3 months.
Wow. Oh, amazing.
And I thought, a dream told me I'm supposed to do it. So I just blindly, and they have different tracks. And they had one track that was depth psychology and archetypal mythology. And I thought that's perfect because I'm a storyteller. So we studied the myths from all over the world as well as Jungian.
Amazing.
And it came mostly my second book after The Way of Story. And after I got my graduate degree, I wrote Heal Yourself with Writing. And which won the Nautilus Book Award that year, which was nice. I had evolved the course at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. It's a very progressive institute. Pearls, Joseph Campbell, many progressive thinkers have taught there. And I evolved this course using short writing prompts to self-heal grief and trauma and create a deeper dialogue with the self, capital S. And after I taught this and created the course, I eventually wrote the book. And it has a very Jungian footprint signature there.
I must find the book and read it. But moving on, Catherine, as someone who has explored various dimensions of creativity, what does storytelling mean to you personally?
Well, for me, life is story. I can't think of any part of life without a story tagged on to it, During my New York years, I met a wonderful poet called Muriel Rukeyser. And she said, in fact, I used her quote, I think, in The Way of Story. She said, the world is made up of stories, not atoms. And I really think, and it helped not only with my writing, but teaching. I noticed, because I've had a parallel career. I taught at the New School University in New York and then later USC. I noticed in teaching, when you're trying to teach certain principles, if you give a story example, the students will remember the story. And if they remember the story, they have the principle you're trying to convey. So my nonfiction books follow that. I often use examples from my own career or life to illustrate what I'm trying to put across. And it seems to work.
Absolutely. And, given the number of years you spent in theater and writing film scripts, how do you think theater and film has evolved in terms of roles and representation of women since you began your career?
Well, it is better, but not enough, in my opinion. But one reason it's better is that more women are writing, directing, and a lot of the star actors are creating their own companies in Hollywood. So, and obviously, if they're creating their own companies, they're looking for good roles to play. And I've had the good fortune to work with some, well, that's, by the way, the Dolly Parton job came to me first in a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I dreamt about an angel who could not find her wings. And anyway, I wrote it down. And the same week, I got a call from Dolly Parton's company.
Mm-hmm.
She had seen a movie I wrote called The Christmas Wife, which got 4 nominations.
Wow.
And she wondered if I had something for her. And I remembered the dream.
Mm.
So I prepared that and pitched it to her company. And they said, oh, Dolly will love this. And they took me straight to her house in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that Dolly Parton loves angels because I don't read the magazines and all that.
Right.
So I walk into her garden and there are angel statues and fountains. I walk into her living room. There's a tapestry of angels and just little sculptures. And I thought we're home free. So she did the Disney movie, which got a good response. And
very interesting.
so listen to your dreams. That's the moral.
That's such a powerful statement you've just made to our viewers and listeners. My next question, Catherine, is what are some of the challenges and rewards of adapting stories for different kinds of mediums? You know, turning a play into a musical. And now, of course, there's this whole onset of OTT web series.
Okay.
I'd love to get your perspective.
Well, I wrote a play called Calamity Jane, which was done first in New York, and then it's had several productions. And she was American early 19th century cowgirl. And a woman ahead of her time. She was an Indian scout and a Native American scout, Indian, and drove the stagecoach. And I was approached by some well-known composers and lyricists who wanted to turn it into a musical. So I said, sure, go ahead. They said, no, we want you to write the book. And I told them I've never written a musical, but they said, but you know the play. And that was done first with the New York cast and a few other productions. Now, when they revive the play, I miss the music. I prefer the musical version because the songs are wonderful.
Amazing.
And I don't know if this interests your listeners, but one of my ancestors is a frontier hero called Davy Crockett. And I felt really his spirit in me when I was writing her, because it's the same time period, the American Wild West. So the play's really about the myth and reality of the Wild West.
Amazing.
And my Calamity Jane is the real story, not the Doris Day version, the earlier film.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, I'm going to now move to talk about your book, East and West Stories of India.
Yeah.
Tell me about your book and how did you navigate, given, of course, a strong relationship you've had with India for so many years, how did you navigate the cultural nuances and storytelling traditions of India?
Well, of course, I've spent years in India. As I mentioned, my marriage was to an Indian novelist, Raja Rao. But I don't really navigate. I remember when I heard your question, I thought that's not really my approach to writing. Come up with a premise, sometimes from dreams, sometimes just imagination. And then I create the characters, and then I surrender to the story. And the characters kind of take over and go their own way, if I'm lucky. It seems to turn out better that way. So I guess I'm more an intuitive writer. So I don't feel I'm in control. I just set things up and then get out of the way. I get out of the way.
Amazing. My next question is that, when you talk of differences in culture, storytellers always need to adapt their stories to handle multiple cultures. And you live in a country which is probably one of the most culturally diverse countries in the world, in the US.
Hmm.
How do you handle the challenges of culturally diverse settings when it comes to storytelling?
Well, if we're talking about my 8th book, East and West, Stories of India, I have no doubt that I've lived in India in past lives. The first moment I went there, I knew India. And the goal of this particular book, which came about unexpectedly, I did a Fulbright research here in India years ago, and I had the idea to write a book of short stories, fictional, set in India, but I only wrote one. That was published in London in a magazine called Poetry London, Delhi. And a publisher who is from India but living in Cambridge read that story, got in touch with me and asked if I would write 14 more stories for a book of India stories. And it couldn't have come at a better time. The pandemic had happened, and I couldn't go as I usually go every year to India. So India came to California. I got to write. But as to the culture, human beings may be varied, but they're basically universally the same in many ways.
Right.
I learned that before the pandemic, I'm invited to teach all over the world. I've taught at National School of Drama in Delhi, England, and Greece, and so on. And I was invited to Kuwait to do Heal Yourself with Writing. So I walk in, and they're all women, except one man's in the class. And these were educated women, bankers, psychiatrists, financial planners, doctors, educated women, but they were dressed totally in purdah. I could only see their eyes. So I thought at first, well, this is going to be challenging. And somehow, I guess it was intuition. I hadn't planned it, but my opening sentence to them when we began the 3-day workshop was, "We are all children of Abraham." I don't know if you get that, but all the monotheistic religions come from Abraham, And the ice broke, and it was a very strong bonding. And it was a wonderful experience. So I realized, you might see outer differences, like the way they were dressed, but somehow the human spirit is universal, and it's really a wonderful experience. I love teaching, and I like the parallel of teaching and doing what I teach, writing.
Fascinating.
So I guess I digressed a little, but
absolutely. No, that's okay. So I've got time for 2 or 3 more questions. I want to talk to you about your plays Calamity Jane and Women of Cedar Creek. How do you balance historical accuracy with creative storytelling?
Good question. I love research. It's a treasure hunt. So I spend a lot of time reading, researching, and I try to be faithful to the historical data as much as I can. I do take some dramatic license, like I might expand certain things. I might put the dates of events closer together for a more powerful dramatic effect. But I try and be faithful to the essence, if not the details, the essence of the story.
Right. Okay. And, when you talk about your book, Buddha and the Dancing Girl, how do you perceive the relationship between creativity and spirituality?
Yeah. Well, of course, that's a memoir. And A Buddha and the Dancing Girl, A Creative Life. Let me explain the title because I think that might answer the question. I lived in Japan when I was a child, a young child for 2 years. And I had two experiences that had a deep impact. I was like 4 years old. And the first one, my Japanese nanny took me to see the Kamakura Buddha, this huge bronze Buddha, 900 by 500 feet. And I remember being very tiny and looking up at this Buddha and thinking, oh, this is what they mean by God. So that was my first image of what God was. And then the same week, my parents took me to the Cherry Blossom Festival outside Tokyo. And the dancers, actresses were performing on a stage in the park. And I wanted to join them. And I ran away age 4, and I was missing for 2 hours. I wanted to join the theater troupe. So this became the archetypal symbol and theme of my life and my memoir, meaning Buddha representing the search for the spiritual versus the compulsion to create dramatically. So this became a kind of tension of opposites, as Jung would call it, which can be very creative, but it was a pendulum swing. For instance, I get a lead in a play in New York, and as soon as the run of the play ended, I'd go off to India, which is my spiritual home. It's not a strategic career move to have a success and disappear for 3 months, but I have no regrets. So the memoir theme is about those are the two they seem polar opposites, but eventually they have to integrate and merge.
Very nice. Thank you.
I don't know if that's
No,
clear.
it answers my question. And my last question to you, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own deep understanding of writing, what advice or what lessons would you give to aspiring writers and storytellers, especially in today's rapidly changing technology and media landscape?
Yes. Well, first, as I tell my students and my consultant clients, there's no one way to write anything any more than there's one way to lead your life, live your life. So I believe that very strongly. And I get very angry when I have students tell me they had a writing teacher that said they had to write like him or her or something. I would say be authentic, discover your own voice, and then it's unique. You know, your own voice is usually your values, what you care about, what you believe in, and so on. For instance, David Mamet, everything he writes, whether it's a play or a film, it's about corruption. That's what gets his juices going. Everything he writes is about corruption. So when you find your values, you'll know what you're drawn to write and follow that.
Fascinating. And on that note, Catherine, and your wonderful thoughts of, saying there is no one right way to write, choose your own and, of course, learn a few things about it. And the second one you said was be authentic and discover your own voice. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey. It's been so fascinating talking to you about such a diverse range of writings that you have done. And what an amazing storyteller you are, because I'm sure my audience will listen to this and be fascinated with the diversity of storytelling.
Could I add one quick thing,
Sure.
if I may? I'm partial to stories that touch the heart without being overly sentimental and that raise consciousness. That's why I agreed to write for the TV series Touched by an Angel, which is streaming now. And one day a letter, my producer told me a letter was sent by a man who had decided to commit suicide. And he happened to have the television on Sunday night, CBS. He had never seen the show before, but he got hooked into watching it. And he ended up crying at the end of the 1 hour episode. And he wrote to us, he decided to give life another chance.
Wow.
Now, I don't think there's enough movies or television shows that can do that. I think we need more of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure there will be many, many more coming from you to be able to encourage people.
We need more than that.
Absolutely.
These
I agree.
days.
I agree. But thank you again, Catherine, for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.